Hey folks, Eric the Old Jarhead here. Welcome back to the channel and thanks for watching. After the last video that you saw me messing around with some black locust, and I'll drop a link down in the description for you if you haven't seen that one. But you know, the control panel was still working, the mill was feeding reasonably well. I wasn't having too much trouble with it, so I decided to keep going and get this job done. And we had a lot of black locust here. The customer had about 40 logs. He lucked out. There was a guy nearby with a black locust orchard, I guess, and he'd cut them all down and said anybody can have them if they want them. So the customer found out about it and went and hauled out a whole bunch of logs. And as you can see, these are old black locust logs. They're pretty gnarly. These logs, you know, there were some really good ones in there, but there were some that it was a challenge on, and we had to really work with them. You know, sometimes you can cut out hooks and bends and things, and you can take the stress out, and there was a lot of punk in some of these logs, and so, you know, I had to kind of flip them around a lot and just sort of figure out how to get down to a decent cant. Now, I'll admit that these logs were probably the biggest challenge I've ever faced in a dozen years of turning logs into lumber. So you'll see throughout this video, we definitely had some challenges. One of the things that we ended up having to do a lot of is kind of work down, getting close to a cant, and then flip and roll again. And part of that was because there was punk in different parts of the logs, you know, so not only are they a bit odd shape and they had stress in them, but, you know, there was some punk here and there. And so I had to kind of work around that. But I will tell you that there was some really good wood in these logs, and so somebody might have just cut up and split and burned in the wood stove actually yielded quite a bit of good black locust lumber. And the idea here was to try to get as much 1x6 as we could because we wanted to make a floor out of it. And I've got to tell you, a black locust floor not only would be beautiful, but tough as nails, because this is very, very hard wood. You know, the usual applies here. Get the log up on the deck, get it flipped around into a good position, and start working it down into a cant. And one of the things I started facing right away was the wind had come up and really started pushing in my direction. And when we first set up, the wind was kind of going crossways to me, and it did that periodically. But as you can see, there's not much in the way of hills or trees out here. We're milling right in the middle of a farmer's field, essentially, in this little hollow spot below the main field areas. So there's nothing to stop the wind. Now, how about that little guy? 6 years old, and he's doing his best to try to off-bear for his dad, help his dad out. This little guy, I have to tell you, I was really impressed. Not only was he kind of, you know, for a 6-year-old, he's kind of hard working. He was jumping in there and trying to off-bear lumber and constantly watching the mill and me operate it. So it was really kind of this cool thing. Oh man, look at that wind. Just tore that umbrella sideways, turned it into a big sail, knocked the camera over. This was, you know, we had just a light breeze, and all of a sudden this big massive breeze came through, and it actually didn't completely break the umbrella. It loosened up the knuckle enough that it just kind of flipped over. And I was able to get it straightened up and get the umbrella back up again and shade me, which, you know, was really good because we were bumping up against 90 degrees out here, and there was just no shade, no trees, nothing to hide from the sun from. So, you know, having that umbrella was really, really helpful. However, that particular umbrella wasn't very strong, and when the wind hit it, it really buggered it up good. So, but I got it back up, got it running, and we got back to milling. And again, that little guy just kept jumping in, trying to help out, and you're going to see that throughout this video. It's just an amazing little guy. He paid a lot of attention, really tried to help out wherever he could. It was amazing. Customer friendly actually ran over and picked up my main camera for me, so thank you, Michael, for that. Much appreciated. And that camera had been blown over the same time that the umbrella blew sideways on me, and that umbrella, you know, it really does help. You know, if you're wondering why I have it up there, now that one's a bit bigger than I usually run. Normally, I used to always have an 8-foot umbrella, and I had one that lasted me 2 or 3 years. It worked pretty well. This one is a 10-footer with a knuckle in it, and it gives a heck of a lot more shade, but unfortunately, it also gives a lot more surface area for the wind to hit. All right, get that one off the deck, and look at that little guy. He's like, come on, Dad, I can help you out. He wasn't quite strong enough yet to lift boards off the deck and off there for real, but you know, that little guy, you know, he tried really hard, and I was really impressed with him. You know, I love to see that. Not only did he want to help, but if you watch throughout the video, you're going to see that he pays a lot of attention. He watches very closely everything that's going on. And then he came over and I showed him how to operate the controls, which he kind of figured out on his own already. See that one right there? Push that up. Push hard. Hard as you can. There you go. Keep going. Okay, that's it right there. Get that one up on the deck, and I let him load that up. I thought that was great, but don't worry, he'll be back. And it isn't a case of a little guy that, you know, you're just trying to entertain. He honestly wanted to learn how to run the mill. I mean, if he was tall enough, and I told him and his dad, I said, if he was tall enough, he could run this mill entirely. I tell you, this young man, if he sticks with this kind of stuff, he could easily run this sawmill in a few years when he's tall enough to reach the controls. Anytime, you know, I started working on a log like this one here, you know, the bark holds a lot of dirt and rocks, and so I just needed to get up there and try to clean some of that bark out on both sides, and that little guy jumped in, he started pulling bark for me too. I got to tell you, I haven't seen a lot of young kids do that kind of thing, so it was really amazing to see. Dad's a hard worker, he's another Marine, so I kind of like to think maybe it's because he's a Marine son, you know, maybe that's what it is, but honestly, hats off to the parents. Awesome job raising this young guy, and he's going to turn out really well. All right, so, you know, after getting the bark out of the way, cleaning things up a little bit, we got back to it and started knocking it down again, and, you know, typical milling. And I guess, you know, one of the things that I thought I would say, my wife kind of described these videos here, or my videos, as the world of milling. It's not all perfect. And then she added, but a 6-year-old could do it. You know, one of the things I try to show in my videos, and I hope that you see that, is I don't hide anything. I try to show you the real world of running a sawmill. It's not all straight logs with clean bark and stuff like that. You know, sometimes you just run into things that are a challenge. You can see here the wind is just blowing the sawdust everywhere, and the logs are not perfect. Mother Nature has its own way of doing things, and, you know, but key, I think, to being a good sawyer is recognizing that that's life. That's life on the sawmill. And sometimes your logs are just not perfect, round, you know, great things. In fact, I'll tell you the truth, most of the time they're not. And these logs were no exception, but boy, they yielded some great lumber, and that's really the key here. You know, you just don't get good hardwoods all the time out where I'm at. It's mostly softwoods. And when you get some hardwood like this, why not take it and turn it into something easy? That wind is just kicking up, and the umbrella was kind of cocked off to one side a little bit, and I didn't mind that. It was providing a little extra shade. What you see me doing here is using a high-pressure air nozzle just to blow some of the sawdust out of the way. Sometimes, you know, stuff builds up and it gets in the way, and those 747s I was using, they really pushed a lot of sawdust out the side, and with that wind, it was blowing all over. And of course, you know, every hour and a half or two, you got to refill the water jug. I use Waterloo, just pine sol, dish soap, and water. I've been doing it for a dozen years, and it works great. I know a lot of guys talk about using diesel. I don't really understand that because pine sol and dish liquid and water works perfectly fine. All right, get that log rolled over and get some of that bark out of my way. And because this log wasn't that long, you know, I use the manual side support sometimes just to help, because, you know, logs like this, when you're trying to roll them, it's good to have every edge you can to prevent them from rolling off onto the operator side. Get it rolled over again. Now we're finally getting down to some decent faces, but you can see it's not the best shaped log, and that's okay. We're going to get it down into a cant, and we're going to get it milled off the deck and get some good lumber out of it. Sometimes you get a piece of bark that just gets caught between the rollers and the mill deck itself, and it'll stop the head. When that happens, you just got to stop, pull it out, get it out of your way. All right, now I gotta tell you, you gotta watch this right here. You're gonna notice that I'm not at the head running the mill here in a second. Watch this. Notice who's standing over there at the hydraulics. How cool is this? And up she goes. That little guy. Perfect timing. I'm telling you, this little guy was amazing.
Okay, right there. A little bit more.
All right, thanks for watching, folks. Lots more to come. Thanks for watching. Y'all have a great weekend. The old Jarhead out.